All right, so part 2 of the YouTube Wars advice and tips is specifically for the BBR game. For this one we're playing, and anyone else that's really playing. For the one we're playing, we've got these victory roundels that, I have the whole set. But so I'll keep track of those because no one has that set. I'll also use this part of the income tracker for tracking the tech. Now, on the Allies side, I won't know what these techs are. Well, no, actually, the Allies I will. I'm on the Allies. On the Axis, I won't know what those techs are until they're revealed. So they'll have to share between themselves, but we can still move them the same. And the movement is at the beginning of each round. So Germany is in charge of finding out where each nation is going to be. So on turn 1, the major nations all start on the first level of tech, and for $4 they can advance to the second. So round 2, they're going to pay another $4, and then round 3 is where you roll 1 dice, and so $1, you pay $1, and you're kind of going to go up here to the next stage. You can choose to roll. You don't even need to pay the $4. I mean, sometimes I've seen nations not use tech at all. And then once you get into the holding area, that is where you're going to buy dice. So for $4, you're going to buy 4 dice, roll them, and any 6s or 5s are successful. So that was, hugely successful. So then your tech would be active. So Germany is going to be doing that at the beginning of each turn, because Germany goes first at the beginning of every turn. And then they'll make sure people are collecting the money. They'll roll the dice, for that first round, and then, everyone will have to tell them on that final round of tech how many dice they want to purchase. And it's 1 IPC per dice. So I've seen people do as little. Actually, I've seen people do 1. I think the last time I saw somebody do 1, it might have been Sireblood, and he actually got it because he had 1 IPC left over, and then he was going to do it the next turn after that, but he actually got it with 1. So that was a heroic effort, I'm sure. So that's how that's going to go on the beginning of the round. Like I said, I'll just keep track of these victory points. The other thing that's immensely helpful, is a card deck, and it has all sorts of nation-specific cards, national objective cards, some player aid cards. The ones that are kind of interesting for each nation is these political situation cards, and I lay these 3 out here because they're the only nations that if they lose their capital, the game ends immediately. So Japan, US, and Germany, if they lose their capital, say Japan loses their capital on turn 6, on turn 7, they have 1 opportunity to take it back. So if they don't take it back by the end of turn 7, then the game ends immediately, in an Allied victory. And oddly enough, Japan I've seen several times, but I've also seen US and Germany, those capitals fall and the game end. So you got to be wary of your capital. Those are the only 3 that end the game specifically. I will see if I got I think I have the card deck in a PDF at work, and I will email that to the people playing the game. If not, you can go to siredblood.com/community, and once you log in down at the bottom, then all these tabs turn red, and you can go like Bloodbath Essentials. That's where the downloads, so you can get the map, you can get the rule book, and I think this income tracker is on there as well, so you can download, print those off for yourself. Like I said, the card decks are pretty important because the national objectives are not the same as out of the box. The one thing that's in the rule book that is also in card form is the tech, and these are the different techs that you can roll. This is a page from BBR 3 rule book, so in BBR 4 it may not be on page 22, but it's in there, right? So you can look at the text before the game, decide what you want. And not all texts are useful at all for all nations. Say, like Russia would never use improved shipyards. So that's a helpful tip there. But, find the tech you want, discuss it maybe with your allies. There are some that work in conjunction with other allies. So, form your tech plan to set those up before the game, because once the game starts, you can't change your tech. Now you can stop your tech, say you chose one and then you say, I don't want that one. You can remove it and then start over with a new tech, but then you're already a turn behind, and that would be a problem. Well, maybe it's a problem, maybe not. Maybe you just need that tech at the end, but it's not very efficient.
Before I go any further, I wanted to just mention where I've got my card decks from, and that is makeplayingcards.com. And I believe Matt Todd put these on there, or helped Sired in some way get those on there. So they have two different size decks. On the left is the normal size, and then on the right, the jumbo size. And I've bought a couple of the smaller decks, but at the last BBR I was at a tournament, someone had the jumbo size deck there, and I thought, oh wow, I really like that. Now, the bad side to that is the cost goes through the roof when you get to the jumbo size deck, and you get the plastic card as opposed to the cardstock. I've had both the plastic and the cardstock, and they are both acceptable to me. I did go for the plastic on the jumbo deck just because I thought that would last longer, but either way, you can get it there or download the PDF, I think, from the Sired Blood community, or siredblood.com/community site, and then just print them yourselves on regular paper. Not quite as exciting as having an actual card deck, but either way, I think you'll find them very useful.
Okay, so now I'm going to run through some of the nuances of BBR and the slight differences, from out of box or other Axis and Allies type games. And the easiest way is to look through these cards and go that way. So, and these are in that card deck as well. So air transports, which is completely different from out of box Axis and Allies. And you have the ability to do two different things. You can use them in combat or non-combat. And the rule, as it's been developed, is when you're going into combat, say you were going in there with two guys, and it doesn't matter how many planes, however many land units you have is how many infantry you can move. So each strategic bomber can be used to strategically bomb, or they can attack, and their dice roll is different than out of box. I believe it's 2 dice at 2. I don't have that in front of me right now, doggone it. Mainly because Global War is 3 dice, so I'm pretty sure it's 2 dice. So anyway, the third option for the strategic bomber is to carry 2 infantry into battle, so they're like paratroopers. So one strategic bomber can bring 2 infantry into this battle because there's 2 infantry coming in. Now, if this infantry artillery were also coming in, then the second one could bring an additional 2. And that's a good way to get infantry to the front line in a battle. So put those back, because in non-com, say you didn't do that battle but you wanted to fortify Manchuria, in non-com the limit is 2 infantry per territory. So these 2 strategic bombers could not move 4 infantry into Manchuria. They could move 2 into Manchuria, 2 into Korea. And obviously their movement would be 1, 2, 3, 4, so they could go back. You could build more infantry for the next turn. So they don't end their turn where they drop off. Like a naval transport ends its turn when it drops off. The other thing that is worth making a note of is if you only had 2 infantry in Japan, at the beginning of your turn, the strat bomber has to be in the same territory with the infantry. So this one here could not go 1, 2, pick up and go. They have to start the turn in the same territory. And it's just trying to prevent some crazy maneuvers, I suppose. But that it makes sense. I know in the global war game you can move that air transport. Now they don't. Well, their strat bombers can drop paratroopers, but they can't move infantry. But an air transport can move to pick it up. So that's slightly different than that. So let's take that card off. Bombing raid. Like I said earlier, the strategic bomber can come over, say if Manchuria was, a different nation, and bomb that. It's worth noting that the values of damage is higher in BBR. The attack bombers is still the same. They can hit naval bases, air bases, and the max is 6. But the minor industrial complex in and out of box is also 6. But with a strategic bomber, it's now 10, and then a major factory would be 25. Now say you develop tech and got heavy bombers, now you're talking some major damage. It goes up from 15, 35. So you could really lay some smackdown on factories, with that tech. So the other thing you can look at that tech is it can also move some other units other than infantry. All right, anti-aircraft. So standard 1 anti-aircraft, no problem. 4 planes come in here, you got to roll 3 dice. If you had 2 anti-aircraft, you could roll 4. What's new for BBR is that battleships have anti-aircraft. So say these 4 planes came off the carrier to attack that with those ships. The first thing you would roll would be your anti-aircraft, and it would be 3 per battleship. So if it was just 1 battleship and 4 planes, you'd have 3 dice at 1. 2 battleships, you would just have 4 dice. It's just 1 per plane. You also might remember, ask your opponent if they want to scramble, because there's an air base here on Okinawa, so they could scramble that into the battle. That's just a sidebar there. So if a battleship was damaged in a previous battle, it no longer has anti-aircraft. So in attacking that, you would just have the 3 dice for the 1 battleship. And then, of course, the movement and the dice for attack and defense is lowered for a damaged battleship. Now, the other thing that you could have here with these planes, and let me grab that card. Target select. So all these planes are coming in, blah, blah, blah. You've got battleships, so you have anti-aircraft, and it would be the same with this anti-aircraft gun. If they were attacking, Japan was attacking up here, they couldn't target select. So anti-aircraft eliminates the ability to target select. So this battle here with the battleships, no target select, but you remove the battleships, well, now you can target select. Maybe you can target select that destroyer or sub. What you can't target select is transports or infantry. Those are off limits. As we found in China, Japan was able to target select all the infantry in China away, and there was never any defensive rolls. So infantry, transports off limit. So now if you choose to target select, you're going to roll a 3 as your attack on that target select. Normally with the fighters, it would combined arms for a 4, but the target select is a 3, and it's only the first round of combat. So if that 3 misses, then on the second round of combat, the tactical bomber is still at a 3. It never gets boosted back to a 4. So your decision beforehand is, do I want the hits or do I want to target select, you know, and prevent any damage coming your way, because it's basically a first strike. So that destroyer would go if you had a hit, and then that would be the end of that. So let me put those back for now. All right, good magnets, good magnets. Put those ships back on there. And let's move on to naval blockade. So let's say we had these U.S. ships spread out. The ability to block or completely block naval movement is no longer a thing. So the blockade here, for each one of these ships, it blocks 3 surface ships. So since it's a destroyer, it can block a sub, a destroyer, and a battleship. So that battle has to be won by the Japanese Navy in order for this battleship to get through to those carriers. Now planes, they don't block anything, or I mean ships don't block any planes. So the planes from here in Japan, they could all get into there with that battleship. But this battle has to be won first, which it should be. Could be some pretty crazy rolling and it not be won. So that could happen. And then say they had 2 ships in there. Well, now you got to block 6 ships. So Japan here in this scenario does not have 6 ships, and transports do not count. So therefore, there's no way they could get through, other than if they had a naval base and they went around, assuming that this was blocked as well. What's left here? I don't have the card here, but convoying is slightly different. In a normal out-of-box game, each sub would get 2 dice, and you know, if you rolled 1s or 3s, those were successful. We'll say you rolled all 4s, 5s, and 6s, and that's a failure. So you would take no convoying off of the Japanese IPCs, which would be 8 for Japan and 3 for Korea. In BBR, you automatically get 2 right off the bat. So you've already taken 2, so you roll your dice. All right, so there's 3 more. That's a miss. So that would be 1, 2, 3 plus the 2 ships. So 5 IPCs come off of Japan via convoy. A lot of times if you've got a big American fleet and you win that battle and Japan can't get you out of there, and say you've got 8 ships in there, well then you're already starting off with 8 IPCs that you can convoy for Japan, or from Japan. Railway. This is one of my favorite additions to this game. Wherever you have a factory, now there's nowhere to rail here in Japan, but say there was a factory here in Korea, you can rail 3 spaces, and your limit of units is based off the territory. So from Manchuria, it's worth 3 IPCs, therefore you can rail 3 units, 3 spaces, which helps you get into China. And the reason being is this game ends in 8 turns, so you don't have the luxury of marching across China like in an out-of-box game. So from Korea, you only have 2. Well, you can rail 2, 1, 2, 3. So, and it doesn't matter minor or major. There's a railway connected to every factory. You can go any direction. You just can't go into, say Japan just captured Amur, you couldn't rail into Amur or through it. So even if you already had, these 2 over here. So newly captured territories is off limits for rail movement. And there's a combined arms card in there. Most of these are all similar to out of box. When you get down here at the bottom here, and it's a defense only modifier, when you have a cruiser and a battleship together, the cruiser is boosted to a 4. So sometimes, I don't have a Japanese cruiser out here, but if you're going to take a hit, you got one hit on you. If you damage the battleship, you put your little damage marker out there. If you damage the battleship, now it's going to defend at a 2, but the cruiser is still a 4. So kind of a strategic way to take your casualties. And also, you know, I spoke earlier in the other video of your before your turn starts, find out the order of casualties. And for most battles it doesn't matter, but it really does on naval battles when you have carriers and battleships. But for the most part, you know, smaller battles probably not so significant. Let's see, I've got a Kamikaze card here. Now this is with the Japan deck, and it is different in that you can't use kamikazes whenever you feel like. You still have 6 that you can use in a game, but certain things have to happen. And I believe if the Philippines, Okinawa, or Iwo Jima falls, or one of these Japanese territories, then you get, at that point you get to use your kamikaze tokens. Or if Japan is under 36 IPCs on the income tracker. So when they get to that point, you know, obviously Japan's getting, you know, compressed and losing territory, and that will trigger the kamikazes as well. So be aware, you know, sometimes you might come out here, oh, I'm going to snag Iwo Jima, it's worth $1, you know, or Okinawa, but at that point you unleash the kamikazes, and if you're strong enough it doesn't matter, but if you're kind of weak in your approach, you could easily, you know, take a beating there. Now the kamikazes are rolling a 2, so it's not you know, a serious threat, but it is a threat nonetheless. And one of the other cards that is very beneficial is the victory scorecard, which lists out all the victory cities and points that you need. And in an 8-round game that we're going to be playing, 12 is the magic number. Get to 12 and hold 12, and you win as the Axis. Anything less is an Allied victory. So a lot of times you'll see a game and the Axis, they'll get up to 15, 16, 17, but they can't hold them all. And then the Allies start chipping away at the end, and you know, the game will end really on that 12 mark, you know, one way or the other, whether it's 11 or 12. And it makes for an exciting game. The last thing that I didn't mention in the other game was when your turn is over and you've collected your money and you've placed out your units, it's a good thing to do a recap of what's where, you know, and just start wherever you want. Jehol, 2 infantry, Manchuria, infantry, artillery, fighter, tactical bomber, Korea, 2 infantry, you know, blah, blah, blah. And what that'll do is really help out the people that are playing the game, so that they don't have to go, hey, what's this, what's where, you know, and try and figure it out. It's just easy to follow along. If you miss some of the non-combat movements, you know, when you're watching someone else's turn, and you've got a unit out of place on the map, it's like, oh, well, I didn't know that went there, but in his recap it's here. So it's just a good way to alleviate some mistakes and a lot of back and forth texting, you know, on the WhatsApp, you know, what units where and this, that, and the other. So I think the last thing to look at here for BBR is on the map some of the specific territories, neutrals, and features on the map that are a little bit different than out of box.
On the Pacific side, there are 3 features that are kind of new, and actually 4, I guess. For BBR 4, this Gobi Desert has been added, and it is impassable. The Himalayas, we all know, were impassable, but now they extend all the way up through Russia and China. The first section here is impassable. However, this lighter brown is passable by infantry only. And let me grab an infantry over here. So say Japan had some units here in Tingsing. How about Kansu? Let's not say something crazy. So they could march through this pass into Russia, or they could step in there on their turn. Now, while they're in this mountain zone, nothing specific happens. It takes one turn to move in, and then on the next turn they can move out. But the beauty of moving there with Japan is there's 3 Russian territories they can move to from there. So they could come down here, try and get to Stalingrad. Not a very good plan with infantry. Russia can see that coming, but at the same time, you could move down here and say that armor was up here, in Kansu, could come in there. So you could kind of split your attack at Russia. And then, vice versa. Russia could move infantry from Stalingrad into Kazaka, and then into the mountains, and then into really only 2 different Chinese spots. But it's, at the same time, it's more viable than marching all the way up here if you don't have you're using your rail movement for other things. So 2 countries over here. Mongolia is no longer a strict neutral. So Japan may attack it whenever it wants, and it affects no other neutral. There are now more units, and then this central part of Mongolia is worth 1. So when Japan, if they wanted to attack Russia and Amur, they might want to also attack these 2 cavalry in Dornogobi. I believe in a YouTube war, when this first came out, I attacked these cavalry, I attacked Amur, I used planes to attack these 2 infantry in Dornod, and they got 2 hits, so I lost 2 planes. Wasn't happy about that. So it's no longer stuck with the strict neutral rule. The same rules do apply for Japan. If they attack Amur or Tunguska, then that activates Mongolia. So the way Mongolia is removed from the game is if Russia attacks Manchuria, Korea, or maybe a Japanese unit in Kansu. That eliminates the Mongolia from the game. Thailand is now pro-Axis, and Japan can land there whenever they want. If they do so before they're at war with the United States, they do lose their national objective for not being at war with the United States, because in addition to that, you can't annex Thailand, or take French Indochina, or a attack against the Commonwealth or the United Kingdom. So that's been added. So typically that stays out of action until Japan's at war with the Allies, and then they can swoop in. But I have actually seen that where they'll land there and forego this $10 bonus to have these units to invade wherever they're planning on going when they attack the Allies. So that's unique in that aspect. This is all the same, pro-Axis from BBR 3, but different from out of box, as these are pro-Allies. So be aware of that. The units have changed. Iraq used to have 3. It's down to 2, but northern Iran now has 1, or northwest Iran. So that's that fact. What's that doing there? Get out of here. All right, so Spain is the next one up here, and you can see it's now divided up into multiple territories. infantry in multiple spots. Portugal has infantry, but it also now has a ship and more infantry out on the island. I think Africa is still the same, its units there. So how Spain works, these are pro-Axis. So all Germany or Italy has to do is to step in. And once they do, say they step into here, they'll claim those 2 infantry. That activates Portugal as a British ally, and Britain will get, the point for here, those infantry, the destroyer, that infantry, and then down here, these 2 countries as well. So it's kind of painful for Germany or Italy to march in there and claim that. A late game strategy to do that, to gain some points. I've seen that before. The Allies, that has a adverse effect as well. Say the Allies want to come across and invade Spain, and they land here. Well, that triggers all these to immediately become German, but it also triggers pro-Axis Argentina to become Germany. So they got the 4 guys and then the 1 transport there. So there are some negative effects, but I think it's more negative for the Axis to go in there, as you're giving Britain $3 and quite a few infantry. I guess if the Allies go in there, you're giving 4, unless you take, maybe you come down here and you take Castilia, take that point away. But either way, that is Spain in a nutshell. Argentina starts the game pro-Axis, so you can activate it by a certain number of IPCs, and I think it's 53. If Germany gets to 53 IPCs on the income tracker, then this switches to German territory. They get the 2, they get the infantry, they get the transport. At that point, Chile becomes pro-Axis. So on the next turn, they can just walk in and gain Chile as well. 2 more map-specific game differences, and you can't see this one by looking at the map, but there is now a Vichy armistice rule, where if Germany takes Paris, Normandy, and southern France, which is now the city of Vichy, then they can sign an armistice with the French, and then all other French units and territories on the board become Vichy. So Germany will get a national objective of 2, so they'll not get the full 3, but they do get 2, and then on their next turn those units have to leave. So like the ships that would be here, if they did it on turn 1, those would be Vichy. There would be Vichy, in infantry in all these territories. From that point, anybody can attack Vichy and take their territory. So these Italians here can attack that, take that, and they get the $1. The British can come down here and take West Africa, or even walk on here to the equatorial Africa and gain that point, and so forth. So basically, Vichy territories, all the units are stationary, but they are up for grabs from Allies and Axis attacks, to gain these points. And I think, the Russian railway, that was the other one. So from Moscow to Amur is a rail line, and it's Russia only. They're the only ones that can use it. 1 unit per turn can go either direction, as many territories as you want. And a lot of times, like on turn 1, Russia will take that artillery and send it all the way, probably not to Amur because Russia's backing up. If they're going to stack Amur, then yeah, they might move it in there and, beg the Japanese to attack them. But that is specific to Russia only. So Japan, if they come through here and cut that railway, then they can obviously only rail these 2 sections, because then the rest of this is all off limits. So that is the BBR in a nutshell. And hopefully I didn't miss anything. If I did, let me know. Drop it in the comments there. But let me reiterate as well that we're doing this to have fun first and foremost. So if you make mistakes, no big deal. Almost all mistakes are easily correctable. Sometimes you do have to re-roll a battle, and mostly that'll come into play on one of these naval battles where you maybe forgot to ask for casualty order, and then you take them in the wrong order, and your opponent's like, well, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done this. So you can easily avoid that by getting that ahead of time. But if not, like I said, the mistakes, I've not seen any mistakes that's been too crazy that you couldn't easily fix. So with that in mind, our game will start here in, I think it's 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks from now. What is it? Maybe 3. It's that first week of December. I don't see, not sure what today is actually. I think it's the 12th. Might be the 13th. So yeah, that's 3 weeks out. Either way, I'm rambling on. So thanks for watching the YouTube advice series here. And until next time, keep rolling dice.